What if the deadliest warning sign is the one nobody notices? What if a crane can stand tall, look stable, and still be seconds away from disaster? Today, we uncover a collapse that hid in plain sight until the moment it didn't. You're watching Workplace HSE Explained, your source for clear, practical safety insights. In this four-part series, we break down the deadly Dubai crane collapse of 2020, a failure that shocked investigators and exposed how small oversights can grow into catastrophic events. This is the deadly crane collapse no one saw coming. At 7:42 a.m., the Dubai skyline looked peaceful. Workers moved through their routines, unaware that the tower crane above them was already fighting a silent internal battle. No alarms, no visible damage, no reason to suspect that the structure towering over the site was minutes away from twisting, breaking, and collapsing with devastating force. Crane failures rarely begin with dramatic signs. They begin quietly, through subtle vibrations, overlooked maintenance notes, rushed schedules, and assumptions that it's fine because it's always been fine. And in the days before the collapse, those quiet signals were already there. Workers had reported faint shudders during slewing. Nothing major, just a slight tremor that didn't feel right. But the project was under pressure. Deadlines were tight. The crane had passed inspections, so the vibration was dismissed as normal movement. It wasn't. On the morning of the incident, a sudden gust of wind swept across the site. Not a storm, not a sandstorm, just a sharp, unexpected blast, common in the region, but dangerous when a crane is already weakened. The gust struck the jib at the worst possible angle, amplifying stress deep inside the mast. A metallic crack echoed across the site. Workers froze. Radios lit up. Someone shouted, "Check the mast," but the crane had already begun its slow, irreversible lean. Steel groaned, bolts strained, and within seconds, the structure that had stood confidently for months began to fold. In this first part, we've set the stage. In part two, we dive deeper into the engineering, the overlooked clues, and the decisions that shaped this disaster long before the collapse. What if the collapse didn't start with the wind at all? What if the real failure began weeks earlier, hidden inside a checklist everyone trusted? In part two, we peel back the layers of a disaster that was quietly building long before the crane ever moved. You're watching Workplace HSE Explained, your source for clear, practical safety insights. In this chapter, we shift from the dramatic moment of failure to the engineering truths that shaped it. Because cranes don't fall from one bad second, they fall from many unnoticed ones. After the Dubai incident, investigators began reconstructing the crane's final weeks. They found something troubling. Maintenance logs that looked complete but lacked depth. Boxes were ticked, signatures were present, but the details were thin. A vibration note was recorded, but no follow-up action was listed. A torque check was marked OK, yet no torque values were written. On paper, everything was fine. In reality, the mast was slowly losing its structural integrity. Cranes rely on perfect alignment. Even a slight deviation in the mast sections can create stress points that grow over time. Investigators discovered that one of the mast joints had been showing early signs of misalignment. Not enough to trigger an alarm, but enough to create internal strain. Over days and weeks, that strain built up like a hairline crack in glass, silent, invisible, waiting for the right moment to spread. The gust of wind that hit the crane didn't cause the collapse, it exposed it. When the jib swung under the sudden pressure, the already weakened joint couldn't distribute the load. The stress concentrated at a single point, and the steel responded the only way it could. It failed. Workers later recalled hearing a faint clicking sound during operations. Not loud, not alarming, just a tiny metallic tick, like two pieces of steel shifting under tension. That sound was the joint trying to hold itself together. It was the crane's final warning. But warnings only matter when someone listens. The site's schedule was tight, the project was behind, and in construction, time pressure often becomes the silent enemy of safety. When deadlines loom, small concerns get pushed aside. We'll check it tomorrow. It's probably nothing. It's been fine so far. These phrases become the cracks that disasters slip through. In the Dubai case, the combination of misalignment, incomplete maintenance, and environmental stress created a perfect storm. The crane didn't collapse because of one mistake. It collapsed because too many small ones were allowed to stack up. In Part 3, we move closer to the human side, the decisions made, the pressures felt, and the moments where the collapse could still have been prevented. What if the collapse could still have been stopped right up until the final hour? What if the last chance to prevent disaster slipped away not because no one saw the danger, but because no one believed it was urgent? In Part 3, we move into the human side of the Dubai crane collapse, where decisions, assumptions, and pressure shaped the final outcome. In the days before the incident, tension on the site was rising. The project was behind schedule, and every delay meant financial penalties. Supervisors were pushing for faster lifts, longer shifts, and fewer pauses. Workers felt the pressure. Everyone did. And in environments like this, safety concerns often become background noise. One rigger later recalled a moment that haunted him. During a routine lift, he noticed the crane's mast sway, slightly more than usual. Not wildly, not dangerously, just enough to make him frown. He mentioned it to a foreman, who nodded but didn't write it down. "We'll keep an eye on it," he said. But keeping an eye on something is not the same as investigating it. Another worker reported hearing a rhythmic clicking sound when the crane rotated under load. It wasn't loud, but it was new. He mentioned it casually during a break. Someone joked, "These cranes always make weird noises." Laughter replaced caution. Familiarity replaced vigilance. Meanwhile, the crane operator, one of the most experienced on site, felt uneasy. He sensed the machine wasn't responding as smoothly as before. The controls felt slightly delayed, like the crane was resisting movement. He requested a brief shutdown for inspection. But with deadlines looming, the request was denied. "We can't afford downtime today," he was told. "Finish the lifts, then we'll check." That later never came. On the morning of the collapse, the operator climbed into the cab with a knot in his stomach. He performed his routine checks, but the unease lingered. When the gust of wind hit, he felt the crane shift in a way he had never felt before. Sharp, sudden, wrong. He radioed the ground team immediately. "Something's off. Stop all movement." But the warning came seconds too late. As the mast began to lean, the operator tried to counteract the movement, but the internal failure had already begun. Steel doesn't negotiate. Once the structural balance is lost, the collapse becomes inevitable. The tragedy wasn't caused by one person or one decision. It was caused by a chain of missed opportunities, moments where someone noticed something, felt something, or questioned something, but didn't push hard enough to act. In Part 4, we examine the collapse itself, the aftermath, and the lessons that every site, every supervisor, and every worker must carry forward. What if the final seconds of the collapse revealed everything the earlier warnings tried to say? What if the moment the crane fell was not the mystery, but the confirmation of a story that had been unfolding quietly all along? In Part 4, we step into the final moments of the Dubai crane collapse and the lessons carved into its aftermath. When the mast began to lean, the site erupted into chaos. Workers shouted, alarms blared, and radios crackled with overlapping voices. The operator fought to stabilize the crane, but the internal failure had already passed the point of no return. Steel plates buckled, bolts sheared. The mast twisted like a spine under impossible pressure. And then, with a deafening roar, the crane collapsed onto the structure below. Dust engulfed the site. Visibility dropped to nothing. For several seconds, no one knew who was safe, who was trapped, or what had been destroyed. Emergency teams rushed in, navigating debris, twisted steel, and unstable surfaces. The collapse had torn through multiple floors, leaving a jagged scar across the building's frame. Investigators later mapped the failure sequence. The weakened mass joint, ignored, underestimated, and overstressed, had been the first to give way. Once it failed, the load redistributed unevenly, triggering a cascade of structural failures. The gust of wind didn't cause the collapse. It simply pushed a compromised system past its breaking point. In the aftermath, the questions began. Why were the vibration reports dismissed? Why wasn't the misalignment investigated? Why was the operator's request for downtime denied? Each answer pointed to the same underlying truth. Safety signals were present, but the pressure to maintain progress overshadowed them. The collapse became a turning point for many in the region. New inspection protocols were introduced, maintenance logs were tightened, supervisors received additional training on recognizing early warning signs. But the most important lesson wasn't about engineering, it was about culture. A safe site isn't defined by equipment alone. It's defined by the willingness to act on small concerns before they become large ones. It's defined by empowering workers to speak up, and by leaders who listen even when the schedule is tight. It's defined by understanding that every vibration, every unusual sound, every uneasy feeling is a message worth investigating. The Dubai crane collapse was preventable, not through luck, but through attention, action, and respect for the signals that machines and people give us long before disaster strikes. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe and stay tuned for more real-world safety investigations, lessons, and deep dives here on Workplace HSE Explained.